Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys are all enjoying these sessions so far. My name is Adrian Patterson. I'm an application engineer here at Man & Machine. A little bit about myself there. You can see I've been involved in the Autodesk environment or ecosystem, as they call it, for quite a while. I'm here as a Autodesk Vault expert, let's put it that way. I don't like to use the term expert because who really is one? So we're going to be breaking down these various different new features inside of Vault 2025 into three separate sections. We're going to be looking at features which kind of affect authors primarily. We're going to be looking at features which are more administrative in nature and things that could be done in the background. And we're going to be looking at participant enhancements. Now, the participant enhancements is to do with the thin clients and users who might not necessarily have a license, but are interacting with the Vault in various different ways. So let's start off with the authors. Now, the first improvement that we've seen out of the 2025 version so far, actually this one is from 2024.2, so some of these are not necessarily for 2025, but since 2024 was introduced. Keep that in mind. So the first one here is PDF property management. So out of the box, we've now got the ability to go and map different properties to properties inside of a PDF. So we can now use these properties to search and index inside of Vault, so we can then keep track of all of these various different things. And if you think about it, this is something which has been sorely lacking, because most engineering companies that I deal with are using PDFs in one way or another in their Vault. Now, that is usually to keep their drawings and to distribute these drawings. And these properties up until now haven't been able to be mapped or managed with the Vault property management. Now, we can go ahead and update these properties when looking at these various different files. We can now look at PDF thumbnails as well. We can kind of do what we've been doing with Inventor files and other files with PDFs now too, which is just a really, really useful little enhancement. The next upgrade that we've got is towards the copy design utility. Now, if you've been using Vault for as long as I have, you will probably remember that Vault Professional used to have a copy design utility, or the copy design functionality, which is similar to what Vault Basic had right up until 2024. Now, when that enhancement came in, it was kind of a game changer in terms of how you laid out your copies. They made it an independent window so that you could now go back to your work and continue looking at things when you're not copying. This was a lifesaver for me because I used to spend 45 minutes plus trying to get up a copy, and then someone would come and tap you on the shoulder and say, "Can you please show me this drawing?" And you can't, which is a really, really useful enhancement. So they've introduced this similar functionality into Vault Basic, and they've kind of brought the copy design utility in Vault Basic up to speed. So this now allows us to reset property values, find and replace names inside of text areas, and to define rules which would then do various different actions based on criteria. So this is quite a big step forward for people who are using Vault Basic. And don't discount Vault Basic. It's a really, really powerful tool, and the fact that it's included with your software is often overlooked. Right. So the next functionality that we're going to be looking at is called criteria-based search. So those of us who have been using Vault a while know that the searching is kind of the fundamentals of Vault. If you want to find something quickly, you go ahead and you search for it, just how it works. So in this particular case, if you look at the search functionality in the top right corner of this particular image on the screen currently, you'll notice that you can go and type in various different bits of information, and it searches through the Vault in a multi-contextual way to try and find a file which matches, or an item, or whatever it is that you're searching for, which matches the criteria you've typed in, no matter what the property is. And there's multi-different properties. That's what I'm thinking of. Multi-property search. So they've added this contextual searching or criteria-based searching, which allows us to actually enhance our searching functionality with different criteria which are applied from our saved search. So I'm going to go and show this one live because I think it's an important one to actually go and have a look at. If I went into this Vimec ATV folder and I went and typed 200 and enter numlock, it comes up with 3 files. And you can see I've got 2 assemblies and an IPT. Now, in my saved searches, you will see that I've got an IPT search filter. So if I go and click on this, it's searching the entire Vault for all IPTs. If I edit this, you'll see what I mean. You can see its file extension contains IPT, and it's searching in the Project Explorer. This is important because this needs to be set up before this is actually available as criteria. And now as part of the searching, if I go and do exactly the same thing again, I type 200 and enter, I get this drop down over here where I can apply a criteria of IPT search filter. And when I go and press enter again, it is now filtering using the parameters that I set up in my saved search, be searching anywhere in the vault with the quick search functionality in the top right corner. This is a big change in terms of trying to find the data that you might need. You might be looking for, hang on, I want all files where I was the designer or I was listed as the approver. And you can go through a folder and say, apply this criteria, and it will then go ahead and give you all of that information that you might need. Jumping back into our PowerPoint over here. The one which Rob stole my thunder, and I'm going to keep glaring daggers at him for a second there, is email notifications. So there has been a bit of a upgrade in terms of the email system as a whole for Vault. So they've added some functionality in terms of how it can connect to this, because previously in previous versions of Vault, we were limited in terms of how we used to send out those emails from an administrative point of view. So it was using old SMTP functionality to send emails, and IT's come a long way since that was a relevant way of sending emails. So adding some new ways that we can actually send emails and different connectivity services to send them means that we can bring email notifications into the current time, right? We can actually use it in our Vault rather than being an IT headache. So we can now also trigger email notifications based on life cycles. So at various points in a life cycle, we can go and trigger in a state change, for example, send an email using this template, which contains the following information to these people. And you can do it based on, I want this group of people. You can do it based on, I want this person. You can do it based on, I have this criteria for the user, and I want it to send to all people with this in their name, for example. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a little bit about the configuration in the background, and then we're going to dive into how you can configure these emails just briefly. Just going to jump onto our server for a second, and on our server you will find, if I go to administration and I go to networks, advanced settings, I always get those two confused, you will find that there is setup account and enable email notifications. If I go and click on email here, you can see that I now have the ability to change email or send emails from various different sources. So not just Office 365, but also Outlook.com, I can use Google, and if I go to the other section, I can still use the same SMTP settings that I have been using for at least a decade before. You can then go ahead, apply whatever settings you might need in terms of usernames and passwords, and then we can go and set up an email notification interval. Now, this interval is how often it checks to see, is there a new email to send? Yes, no. If there is one, send it. So right now it's set to 2 minutes because then it waits 2 minutes if there's an email and then it sends it. The default for this is 10 minutes, and I'd recommend changing this, specifically this, if you're going to go for email notifications and you need it to be a prompt. What it does is just improves the latency between you doing something in the Vault and someone actually receiving the email. Something similar was set for the job processor. For some reason, Autodesk quite likes to have 10 minutes as the interval defaults set for Vault, and we always turn it down. So there we go. There's how we would set up our emails to actually go and do this. So we'll send emails at least. So how do we go and configure these notifications now? Well, if I go to Tools, and I go to Administration, and I go to Vault Settings, and then I go to Behaviors section, where we'd normally find our life cycles and our revisions and all of our categories, and this fun tab, Behaviors, that we go and like to spend hours on as administrators setting up our vaults. You'll notice that there's a new button in 2025, and that is Notifications. So Configure Email Notifications is now a thing. I go and click on this. You can see that I've got two tabs up at the top, General Settings and Email Templates. So in the General Settings one, I can go ahead and set up in what lifecycle state I would like to go from a particular state to another state. I can select which template I'd like to use, and I can set up who's going to be receiving this email. And you can see that I've added myself, and I've added all people in the group approvers to this particular one. Now, if you have a look at how I've set it up, going from work in progress to for review is then going to send an email notification. Now, why is this important? Well, let's say, for example, you're working in a team, right? You've got someone who's going to be approving the designs that you're actually doing. Someone needs to have a look at these and actually make sure that they're all right before they move on in the lifecycle state. So up until now, we've been relying on, okay, me, Mr. Designer, goes, checks in my design. I move it to for review state, let's say, for example. And I then send an email. I open up my Outlook and I send an email to the colleague who I know needs to be approving this. And I go and say, do you mind please going and looking at this design for me? Up until now, there hasn't been a way of letting them know that we'd like them to check our designs without resorting to third-party plugins and scripts and all sorts of things that we could do before. This is now brought in-house. This is now brought out of the box for us to go and send these emails in this way. So going from work in progress to for review, it's going to send this email using this template. Now, how we go and configure this template, you will see on this tab over here. The default one is pretty much self-explanatory. You would see the following lifecycle transaction has kind of occurred, and it's added some properties. And don't be confused by these various different properties that are kind of in there, this doc variable.file name. That's just how it's representing these properties. And they've actually added a tool for you to do it easier. So you don't need to go and look up how to type this particular property or how to get this particular property in there. So I've gone ahead and set up a template for us over here. And first thing, I've gone and added our signature at the bottom of the email. I've gone and written out a rough email about what I'd like it to be. And this one says that this design has now been moved to the review state. Please review this design as per procedure. And it gives what vault it's in, who was the user who did this, and what time it was that it actually occurred. And I can go and add to this by adding properties in here. So if I click on this add property, you can see I've got files, items, task list. Task list, by the way, is just a custom environment that we've got in here. So if you think you're missing something, you're not. It's been set up. So if we go to files here, I can then go and say, ooh, actually, I want to go and find out what the cost of that item is. And I can go and add the cost of that item in, and it goes and adds doc variable.file cost directly into my template. I can then go and save this, and the next time it sends the email, any emails that have been configured to use this template will now have those properties added to it. Nope. Just move on there. So you can see that we've got this allow notification over here. I can turn them on or off, so you can have them set up, let's say, for example, 20 of them if you want, and you can have 3 of them running if that is what is currently required in the Vault. And changing who's going to be receiving this is as simple as adding members to this. And I can go and add Rob, for spoiling my thunder, to the email notifications too, and click replace. And it'll then email him now all of the changes in the Vault too. And when I'm done, I can click apply and click OK. It's that simple. That's how we can configure email notifications inside of the Vault based on lifecycle states. Now, you can imagine this is also true for item lifecycles as well. Anything that we want to kind of configure in terms of I want this email to send at this point in a life cycle can be done with this. Right, going back to our slides when I don't break my laptop keyboard. Oh dear. Right, we're now going to be moving on to the administrator section. So these functionality, I know I've mentioned some administrator stuff before, but the administrator stuff is primarily focused on administrators, is really what we're aiming for here. So if we have a look at this, this is actually an upgrade which came in 2024, but it's worth me mentioning because they keep refining this tool, and it has been incredibly useful, particularly when people like myself like to do manual backup validations before we go ahead and make sure that everything is fine. So what you've got as options is the ability to back up databases only, so it won't take a file store with it as part of the backup. We can then also choose what vaults we'd like to back up, so we don't need to take all of the vaults. Let's say, for example, we wanted a backup that's got 3 of those vaults. How we used to do this before is occasionally we'd have customers who split vaults to different servers, and you would have to take a full backup of that entire system, restore the backup on one of those servers, restore the backup on the other server, and then delete the vaults that aren't relevant on the relevant servers. Whereas now we can actually take these backups specifically to include the vaults that we wanted to and not include. This gives us the ability to copy less data that's then just going to be deleted on the other side, and improving the speed at which we can do these things. You now also have the ability to restore using an existing file store, which is quite useful if you've got a file store there and you're just trying to not have to copy all of that data from this location to that, once again making it faster if you're having to upgrade in place or on servers where it's been configured before but having to be deleted and reinstalled. These kind of things happen, particularly when vaults go wrong. And also the ability to postpone file store validations is quite a big one as well. This allows us to get everything working and then trigger a file store validation when we might like it to. Properly my keyboard there. Right. So the next thing that we want to go and talk about is deploying client configurations. Now, this tool is actually really, really useful. So we have the ability to go and set up saved searches in a way that could then be copied to users' machines. So let's say, for example, we've got 5 or 6 different saved searches that every designer is going to need at some point. Rather than them having to recreate it on their client themselves, or you go to each machine and recreate it, we can now just deploy that particular saved search to all of the users with a shared saved search. We also have the ability to go and manage and deploy various different grid views and saved searches, sorry, not saved searches, grid views and shortcuts based on what we'd like them to see. So quite often in companies I've been dealing with, apologies, you tend to find that they want to view their data in a particular way. They've got properties that is important to them. It's not always the out-of-the-box view that they want to go and see. They want to see more than that. So with this tool, it allows us to go and configure this once and then just deploy it. So we don't have to, once again, go to all of their machines and set up their views. And then whenever we reinstall their Vault, they've got to go and reset up the views. It can become a bit tedious. This tool just allows us to work more seamlessly. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go and change to, this is going to be a problem. 2 seconds. Okay. Right, fixed it. Now I can actually change screens again because I managed to dislodge a key on my keyboard. Right. So what we were talking about in terms of distributed searches. So you can see I've got distributed searches up here. If I wanted to go and create a search which is then being distributed, I can open the saved search and I can actually file save as, and I can save this as a distributed search for all users. So that same IPT search that we had before is now going to be visible for everyone. So let's go ahead and say IPT for all. And now all users who log in to this Vault will see this search in their saved searches over here under distributed searches, and they will be able to go ahead and view it. Now at the same time, let's have a look at how these views are broken up. So for each of these files, we have this grid down here in history that we might like to configure. We also have this grid up at the top that we might like to configure. So if I wanted to, I could go and set up a particular view, so customize this view, set up my fields as I might like it. Say, for example, I don't want to see revision in there. I don't know why I'd not want to see that, but let's go with it. And click close here. It's now removed the revision from here. Now, normally we would have to go and set this up on every single user's machine. In this particular case, we can actually save this as a view. You can see save as distributed view. And if you are logged in with a user with the permissions to actually go and save these views, you will have the ability to go and save your current view as the distributed view for others to then go and see. So if I wanted to go, and I've already done this, so I've kind of pre-baked this for us. If I go and say reset here, you can see we've got distributed view. I thought I'd saved, and apparently I haven't. So go to system default, I still can't go there. All right, so it's overwritten my distributed view that I had. So let's go ahead and set one up, shall we? Let's go to files and we'll go and find our thumbnail, add that in, and we can move that to the top. This is just a nice big change that we can go and make to what our Vault actually looks like. And we'll go ahead and click OK here. And we'll save this as a distributed view. Now it's going to change my view in the background there, so we can now see we've added the thumbnail to this. We can now see that thumbnail whenever we're searching for various different files. And if I click close, I can always go and customize my view, reset to system default, which will bring it back, and I can also reset it to the distributed view. Now that distributed view reset is going to be available for all users, and actually users who log in after you change this are going to be prompted with, there is a new distributed view available, do you want to update? And if they click yes, that same view will be set up across all clients. Okay. Really, really useful tool there. Right. So the next thing that we're going to be talking about is purging. So purging was that ugly word that people tended to avoid like the plague for quite a long time until your vault got too big. And when your vault got too big, you started needing to consider, hang on, why do I have so many versions of various different files? How can I keep this under control? And how often do I need to go and purge? Well, with the purge enhancements in 2025, we now have the ability to purge on lifecycle transition. This is actually really useful. It's more useful than you might think for such a little tool. Because let's say, for example, you're working on a design. It's a prototype, right? You've got 15, 20 check-ins before it's then ready to go and review. We've now got 15 versions, let's say, for example, just in the work in progress state before we get to the for review state. Every single one of those versions is going to be kept. But that particular lifecycle state is set to keep first and last based on purge. So if you purge the whole system, those 15 different files that you've got are going to be reduced to 2. Now the amount of space that 2 files consumes is 2/15ths of the size. So it's going to be a considerable saving in terms of the amount of space that you are consuming. So by being able to do this on a lifecycle transition, when we say, for example, go from for review to released, it could then purge all of those 15 versions out. So rather than us going through all of these various different files, hundreds of different files again and again and again, each one of them having 15, our vault gets absolutely massive very quickly. If we set up purge on lifecycle transition, and I'm going to say, for example, that you go from for review to released, just an example, whenever would suit you guys is what's going to suit you guys. This is going to allow us to keep that file number under control as we go along, and it's automated, it's in the background. And it's not based on a timer like it used to be where we want to go and purge so often. It's based on when the file moves into this life cycle, go and purge all of the various different versions on this file that is safe to purge whenever it does a lifecycle transition. And that means that we can keep this under control and keep our file store size down, particularly those of us who are running vaults, upwards of 600 gigs, upwards of a terabyte, sometimes bigger. This is a big difference. This is a very, very big difference about how we can keep that size of that vault under control. The next thing that I want to go through is the Vault account password enhancement. And what you will find is that they've now added the ability to enforce a password policy inside of Vault. So administrators everywhere cheer, because how many times have we had, Rob is actually cheering, how many times have we had passwords being changed to password 1 or blank or 123 or password? It's just not safe. In an environment which is keeping our data and our IP safe, sometimes we should have password policies to keep it that way. So this is going to allow us to configure minimum password lengths, whether we'd like uppercase or lowercase, whether we wanted to have numbers or special characters. And if you set up this policy and the user's password does not meet the requirements when they next log in, it actually prompts them to change their password as they're logging in. Something I discovered yesterday testing this out. Right, so let's jump into this and how we can actually go and configure this. So inside of the Vault here, I am logged in as administrator, so that should be fine. Let's go to administration, administration global settings, and we're going to go to the manage access under security, and you can see all of the users that we've got in here. Now, below that, we've got enforce password policy. And if I go and turn this on, I could then go and configure what this password policy is, how many characters I'd like it to be, whether or not I'd like to have lowercase and uppercase included, numbers, special characters. It's that simple. Once I click OK, every user who's in the Vault whose password does not meet that requirements, when they next log in, will be prompted to change their password based on this. Now, because I don't wish to inconvenience all of my colleagues terribly today, I'm going to turn this off again. But this is something we'll be implementing soon. All right. So, diving back into our presentation here. The next section that we're going to be looking at is the participants enhancement. So this is now to do with the thin client. And I know many of you out there are going, why do I need to know about what's new in the thin client? It's the thin client. But you'd be surprised how many companies are actually using the thin client these days to do things like view drawings on the shop floor. So we're getting more and more digital workshops where they've got tablets and things where they want to go and access this, and they're going to use the thin client to go and view that model, preview it in 3D, look at that part, how it's being made, how it's being fitted, actually look at a drawing if they want to. We can go as far as creating markups and saving those markups and sending them via email. Can't do anything else other than send them via email from the shop floor just yet. But I'm hoping that that's an enhancement which is going to be coming in the future. So first things first, let's talk about the ability for us to go and view the markups that have been created. So we've now got an easily navigatable system. So if there's multiple markups in a drawing, we can see who's created those markups and we can swap between them. This just allows us to go and see which markup we're actually viewing and then choose what we want to do with it, see what we'd like to see. We can have multiple markups and easily swap between them. And second to this, we also have the ability, and I know it's a small one, but we've got the ability to hide and unhide things like file items and change order workspaces. So quite a lot of vaults that I tend to put in either aren't using the item space because they're not there yet, or they're not using the ECO because they've got another system to manage the ECOs. And you don't need to see them in the thin client. You're going to have all of these people who don't really have too much to do with Vault going, hang on, what's this button do? So now we've got the ability to go and hide those workspaces so they can't actually see it, and default to the file one if that's all we want them to see. It also allows us, rather cheekily, to go and upload a custom logo so that we can make the thin client more our own. This allows us to show company logos rather than the Autodesk logo in the thin client. So let's jump into our thin client, shall we? You can see thin client I've got set up here. The first thing I'm going to point at is have a look at the Man and Machine logo in the thin client. Nice and neat. And if I wanted to, I can go and view a file. So here's this VMX clip that I've got. Oh, of course. Bear with me. There's the VMX clip that I've got. And if I go and click on view, I can see that I can go and view this file in 3D. It's how it gets used on shop floor, right? Except I now have this markups button. And if I go and click on this markup, I've got a browser which allows us to go and see what markups have been created. And if I go and click on it, it actually goes and shows me that particular markup. And if I wanted to, I could save this as a snapshot for me to deal with on the shop floor. At this point in time, in the thin client itself, I can only save this as a PNG, which then downloads the file. But I can then go ahead and use it in another way, right? I can also go and create markups here. So let's go and exit this and let's create a new markup, shall we? Clear that markup, and we can go ahead and create a view over there, and we can go and add some text in, and all right, there we go. When we're done, we can go and save this as a snapshot, and once again, it'll download it as a PNG for me to go and save it and send it to someone externally. At this point in time, I can't go and take this markup that I've done in the thin client and go and send it via email. So if I go back to the Vault for a second and I go and have a look at that exact same file, make sure that it's reset. There is my clip. If I wanted to, I could go and create a view on here and go ahead and do a markup. With that markup, let's go and create a new one. Let's go and do that same one on the other side. Oh, need to actually change our view beforehand. Let's make this a bit bigger so that we can actually see what we're doing. And go ahead and use that. And in this markup space, I can go and create a new one. Just go and select this whole right over there, and I can go ahead and save this as data, and this would allow me to go and save this as markup 2, which would then upload this to the Vault. So in my browser panel, I now have access to markup 2. You can see that we have a question, which we'll get to when we're done. Right, so 100% we'll get to that question in a second. So if I now go back to the thin client over here, and we go and do a quick refresh of our screen, obviously it needs a bit of time to go and see what's there. We should now have access to that markup, and that markup 2 will now be available. So what this means is that you can also use this tool to go and show bits of information on the shop floor. Let's say, for example, there's a common question that's been asked about putting a particular piece of equipment together. You can go and have these answers already illustrated in a markup, which is then just saved into the thin client, so that this is viewable for everyone who might be on the shop floor trying to put it together. Now, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the end of the Vault content that I have to show you. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is Vault PLM. Now, I'm aware that there's a slight contradiction in terms of what I've just said there, but Vault PLM is not including Vault content, it is including additional licenses with your Vault license. So for a while now, there's been a license on offer called Vault PLM, which includes other products as well, namely Fusion, Manage, and Upchain. Now, this allows users to get going in a different environment, a PLM environment, and start tracking and managing other processes. This is something we're finding is increasingly more in demand and increasingly popular. So if I go across, here is an example of what Fusion Manage can do. So if I go to my Fusion Manage dashboard here, you can see that I've got my outstanding work. I've got charts of information that's talking about various different things I've got going on in my business. I've got bookmarked items. I've got my recently viewed items. This is just on a home screen where I can go and see everything. Now, what Fusion Manage specializes in, and this is the important thing, is it's got a whole bunch of different environments. So if I go to the workspaces here, you can see I've got product portfolio management, I've got change management, I've got quality management. And if I go to change management, for example, just under there, I've got problem reports, I've got change requests, change orders. All of these can be tracked inside of here. Any process that you've maybe been doing via Excel or manually on paper for years can be replaced with a digital system that's now, cloud shared. So we can go ahead and log in from any device with internet connection and interact with these items as long as we've got a Fusion Manage license. So each of these represents an environment. Environments are filled with items. These items can then go through workflows. These items have properties. These items have sheets that are attached to them. These items can also have attachments that are attached to them. So let's say, for example, we wanted to go and have a look at change orders. Here's an example about an environment. And inside of here, I've got a whole bunch of different change orders. And if I go to this demo set one over here, I can see that I've got a whole bunch of information and properties, which is set up here. This is completely customizable. And while we're on the subject, please don't confuse this with the Fusion Manage extension. This is Fusion Manage. Fusion Manage extension is a very stripped down version of this that only works with Fusion, and there is no customizability. This is something we've run into recently. So keep in mind, this is just Fusion Manage. Right, so all of these properties are completely customizable according to what we might need, and we could then go and add attachments, which might be part of this. In this case, I've got a DWF, which is part of this. I could look at the affected items, and it's linking to another environment with items that's then linked in, so I can go and see, hang on, this is affecting this design, which has been added. And in this particular case, this has been synchronized using a third-party plugin. So our Vault job processor, our third-party Vault job processor, PDM Booster, as Rob mentioned earlier, which you should still go and buy, it can be used to go and push information from your Vault into Fusion Manage and vice versa. So this allows us to go and create a setup exactly according to what you need, which allows information to go back and forth. Okay, so in this particular case, here is an example of a file which has been brought up with this particular one. Okay, just going to go back a step here. And part of this particular item, we can do task planning, we can do Gantt scheduling, we can do various different workflows. Now, again, these workflows are completely customizable. And in the background of Fusion Manage is a scripting environment, which can be used to configure any automations that you might need. Let's say, for example, I'm moving from change control board review to released. At that point in time, there was a change request, which kind of triggered this change order. And because it's closing the change order, it's also going to close the change request at the same time. That kind of thing can be scripted. Information being filled in automatically can also be scripted. And checks to make sure that the correct data has been filled in and that the correct information is available to all users who need it when they need it is there. We've also gone and configured email notifications based on custom parameters. So if this tick box is checked and we're moving to this state, go ahead and email these people with the following email of requirements. This kind of thing is completely possible inside of Fusion Manage. So I'm going to urge you all, particularly those of you who've been running Vault Professional for a while and are looking for additional systems that they can go and track, take a look at Fusion Manage. Give us a call, and we'll happily talk to you about how this can improve your business. 100%. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope you enjoy the rest of today's session.